Hi, everybody. This is Chris.
And Kathy.
We wanted to take a minute to thank you all for tuning in. We appreciate every listener and are grateful for this platform.
Please help us share our vision by subscribing to our show through your favorite streaming app. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at PetAbility Podcast.
Check out our ever-growing list of affiliates and sponsors. Simply go to the show notes for information and links.
And be sure to use our promo code PETPOD22, that's PETPOD 22, on checkout to receive your discount from our affiliates. And now, here's a word from our sponsor.
Hi, I'm Alon Landa, CEO of MedcoVet, and I'm a proud sponsor of PetAbility. We decided to partner with Chris and Kathy because, like them, we want to empower all pet owners who are trying to do the most for their pets. At MedcoVet, we specialize in advanced home laser therapy for pets. Laser therapy is a safe and effective treatment for common conditions like arthritis and wounds, and it relieves pain for most conditions caused by inflammation. With MedcoVet, pet owners can perform this treatment at home while receiving support from experienced clinicians. If you think your pet would benefit from healing at home, visit medcovet.com, and one of our clinical experts will work with you to determine if home laser therapy is the right fit for you and your pet. Tell them PetAbility sent you.
For me, I thought, how could I do two things? How could I give back to a community of people that are in desperate need of this therapy modality, and at the same time shed a light on the healing capacity of horses? Welcome to PetAbility. I'm your host, Kathy Simon, certified veterinary technician and certified canine rehabilitation practitioner.
And I'm your host, Chris Cranston, licensed physical therapist and small animal physical rehabilitationist.
Our podcast provides interviews and information to help your pets live their best lives.
Good morning, Chris. How are you doing today?
I am excellent. You know, as I was thinking about this podcast today, I'm thinking we really find unique guests in the most unexpected situations, right?
Right.
In this case, we're interviewing a woman named Kelly Dukarski, who performs what I'm going to call Equine-Assisted Gestalt Therapy. How I came to know about Kelly was I was actually in my own physical therapy session through the owner of the clinic who was performing physical therapy with me, that his wife, Kelly, actually has horses and again performs these coaching sessions with people. And he said, you know what, you should really have my wife on your show. And I was kind of taken aback because my first thought was, well, are these horses actually pets? And Chris is his name. He's like, absolutely. And I'm like, oh, okay, because I've only had dogs and cats and, a few other small creatures. Growing up, I had very little exposure. We did have a pasture that belonged to someone else. It was in our backyard, and we had an apple tree right there. And I'd go over to the fence and feed the horses apples.
You had me at horses when you said we were going to, you had me at horses. And since we had talked about this, in my mind, I was just thinking about horses and how fascinated I am with the horse. And the emotional experience of being around horses is tremendous. The smell of the barn, the sound of the hoofs on the pavement, one of my most favorite sounds of all time. It's just so soothing. And so it's this whole emotional experience that you're having with the horses. And I'd love to talk to Kelly about what is it that's so spiritual and amazing about horses that draws us to them. And not only that, but not only the companionship and the bonding, but just think about our long history with horses, right? And how we've partnered with them. Horses have sustained us as a species. They've helped us on our farms. They've traveled with us. And our history with them goes way, way, way back. So I'm fascinated. I have so many questions. I'm so glad you asked Kelly to be on the show.
So then as I learned that Kelly provides this kind of therapy or coaching with horses, I thought, well, why not, right? Because we have therapy dogs. And in fact, I've done therapy dog work with my own Cavaliers. So like you said, Kathy, I want to learn what makes the horse unique. And Kelly will be talking about, what is equine-assisted gestalt therapy? How does it work? And what is the horse's role? That's my biggest question for Kelly. Before we get too much further into it, I wanted to actually read a quote that Kelly has on her website. My equine partners and I help clients break through the obstacles that are holding them back in life, empowering them to embrace the beauty of who they are and live a grounded, value-based life. Life's too short to be unhappy, unsure, or unfulfilled. Experience how the horses can guide you back to an inspired sense of well-being. Take a nature walk towards self-discovery with a holistic approach to wellness. And just a little bit more about Kelly before we invite her to speak with us on the show. As mentioned, Kelly is a certified equine gestaltist through Touched by a Horse, amongst many other degrees and certifications, including herbalist using plant-based medicine. Early in Kelly's professional life, having a degree in horticulture, she worked as a landscape designer. But the common thread that Kelly reveals is that she has always connected with the natural world. And one of the questions that I had is, what came first? Was Kelly a horsewoman who became a gestaltist, or vice versa? Welcome to PetAbility Podcast, Kelly Dukarski.
Welcome, Kelly.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Kelly, what is Gestalt? And how did, like I mentioned, how did you get to the place you are now in your life?
Oh my goodness. That's a big one, right?
We like to just lay it all out there right at the beginning.
Okay. So Gestalt, let's start there. Gestalt is a German word that means, well, it's loosely translated into wholeness. Gestalt itself is a therapy modality, and it asks us to become present to the world around us and present to ourselves. And within this therapy modality, it's a somatic experience. And somatic is feeling through our emotions, feeling into our surroundings. And that offers us an opportunity to become present to where we're at.
I just want to interject here because I think that's really important, this whole idea of being present. I think this is also a part of a lot of other types of counseling and advice and so forth, because I think as a species, we as people are very anxious, and part of that anxiety may have to do with dwelling on the past or thinking about the future and, you know, what may be coming and not having that control. So being present, and as I alluded to in the introduction, is grounding and makes us as individuals feel better about ourselves.
Well, it gets us to the place where we can see a little clearer in regards to the things that may be holding us back. When we're present and in our body, we have an opportunity to take a look at what's really coming up for us. So you said something that was really interesting, right? You said that most of us, aside from being present, we're worrying about the future, we're filled with anxiety or suffering from depression. And so to clarify that a little bit, anxiety is worrying about the future. Depression is when we are consumed with thoughts of what's already happened or the past. And so when we waver between those two, what that does is it has our nervous system in this flux where we're back and forth and we can never really regulate into the present moment. And when we do, we find that at a place of neutral or equilibrium. And I can explain that a little bit too, because this is a huge component of the work, is regulating our nervous system with the horses. Oftentimes, to give you an example, oftentimes people will come to see me and something's been nagging at them and they're not really sure what it is. And it's usually in a situation like that because they're struggling so hard, their brain is working so hard to try to figure it out. But when they come and they're settled and they're grounded and they're present, it has an opportunity to surface.
What is it about the horse itself that connects us to that. There's something so spiritual about horses, and I don't really know a lot of horses, but again, I explained in the intro, what's better than the barn experience? The smell, the horses, the noises that they make, their hooves on the ground. What is it about the horse that brings that out in us?
So right there, what you described is really a somatic experience. You are experiencing things that through your senses, you're taking that all in. That adds to the experience. It's going to determine how you feel in that moment, right? When your senses are filled with the smell of the horses or being in the presence of them. Now, in the presence of horses, this is where the magic really happens. A horse has the ability to regulate the human heartbeat, the heart rate, from 6 feet away.
Are you kidding me?
They're prey animals. So they respond in that fight or flight. I don't want to call it like a mode, but they're in fight or flight regularly throughout their day.
Me too.
Yeah, most people live every single day in fight or flight. Maybe I'll take a second and just describe that to you. We'll touch on the nervous system a little bit because I think that's a really big component, right? Understanding that link to how the horses interact with us through these sessions. And the way that happens is that if you think of your nervous system as a ladder, and when you stand straight, when you stand on the ground, 2 feet flat on the ground, connected to the earth, that would be considered neutral or equilibrium, this neutral, pleasant state of contentment or happiness. When you take one step up onto the next rung of the ladder, that is fight or flight. And fight or flight, that's pretty self-explanatory, right? We're in that nervous state of trying to decide what to do. In horses, it's a survival mechanism. The next step is freeze. Usually that's a fear state where we're panicked or fear-stricken. So we freeze in place. And then the last is called fawn. And fawn is when we're flat out, when it's usually a depressed state. But in horses, a fawn state would be they've tapped out. They've literally gone, it's nearly catatonic. And so what happens is to regulate your nervous system, you need to come back down each rung of the ladder, experiencing those places again before achieving neutral. And horses do that really fast. They don't typically get to fawn, may get to freeze, but they waver back and forth all day long between neutral and happy and fight or flight. But humans have a really difficult time getting back down to neutral. They mostly live in that fight or flight on that rung of the ladder. And horses, because they're so in tuned to regulating their nervous system, they actually have the ability to help regulate ours.
Going back to the heartbeat, were you actually saying that a horse can regulate the human's heartbeat from 6 feet away?
Yes, I am. That's correct.
Wow.
So if we're, in this fight or flight state, I imagine our heart rate is higher and more elevated than is healthy. And so just being in the presence of that horse is going to calm us almost like in a reverse state, like physiologically first, slower down our heart rate. And then I'm expecting you're going to talk how that works. Go for it.
Yeah, so that's 100% correct. That's what you were explaining, Kathy, when you said, when you step into, when you get to the barn or you smell the horses or you are in the presence of the horses and instantly you start feeling better. Your nervous system is regulating, your breath, is slowing, your heartbeat, you feel good. Right?
It almost feels like you're being integrated into the herd sort of a little bit because you're meeting their state as well, I think.
Yes, absolutely. When you're dysregulated, they're going to do everything they can to try to help to regulate you.
They must be highly, highly intuitive to human states.
Yes, 100%, 100%. And it doesn't have to do with a tone or how someone is speaking. It does, but that's not the first thing a horse senses. So for instance, out west, I'll give you a like an example so that you can, this will sink in. When horses out west, they're in large pastures. As a prey animal, they can sense you or a threat all the way out to the horizon. So when we work with horses, oftentimes we refer to their bubble, their like sensory bubble. Well, in the western part of the United States, their sensory bubble goes all the way out to the horizon. And so they'll sense something that far away coming in to their bubble as either a threat or something they can disregard, how they pay attention to that, how their nervous system responds. Here, it's a little bit different on the East Coast because on the East Coast, we have a lot of trees. They're a little more, they're kept in smaller areas. So when you walk onto a farm, as soon as you pull into my driveway, the horses are aware of you, even if they're out in the furthest pasture. They've already sensed you. They already know that you're there. And as you start to approach their paddocks, they're not only aware of you, they're determining how they're going to respond to you. So if you're coming in with a lot of energy, it may pique their curiosity. They realize that you're not a threat to them. They come running over to you or walking over to you at whatever intensity. They may meet your intensity. If you're coming in really calm and kind of neutral, maybe they'll just mosey on over to you. It's really interesting when you start to pay attention to their response to the people that approach them. They can feel you, they can sense you. Someone who's really nervous or has a lot of anxiety, someone who's fidgeting, someone who has a lot of pent up energy that they don't know how to release or disperse. That is something that my horses are really drawn to. They don't understand. And so they're going to try to do everything that they can to help you kind of dissipate that, because a horse has to regulate their nervous system constantly all day long, and they're masters at it.
So these horses, any horse, does this regulation of their nervous system, which in turn impacts a human's nervous system naturally.
Yeah.
No training is required.
Correct.
So that's
And
just their natural way of being in order to, because of being prey animals, because of being intuitive and insightful, this is just what they do. Okay.
yeah, it goes back to understanding that if we slow down, if we allow ourselves as human beings to slow down and be in the moment, we could have grasped this long ago. We would know this, that it's so interesting that we're moving so fast that we often aren't paying attention to the things that are directly in front of us. It's really, for me, I've had horses my whole life, and I always knew that I felt amazing in their presence. And not just because they're beautiful and they offered me this freedom of going for an amazing ride or connecting to nature when I went on a trail ride with them, that place that was just for the two of us, right? Me and my horse. It wasn't just the bond. It was that I decompressed. My thoughts became clear. I felt better. I just walking in the door, right? Like coming home to this farm, I instantly felt better. And I guess assumed that it was because I was lucky enough to have this farm and be in this space, and it was about appreciating it. But what I learned after all my years as a horsewoman, what I learned was there's actually even more to it than that. And when I did, and I really started understanding that, and I was able to communicate with my horses differently, have a different relationship with them, have a different bond with them. see them, understand them, and vice versa. They were able to see me differently, not as the person who just showed up to ride them or clean their stalls or fed them, but we started to connect on a completely different level, and it was awesome.
That goes back to the original comment that I had early in the show when I said, were you a horsewoman first and then discovered the benefits to our beings later in life, and then pursued this coaching with Gestalt versus having the Gestalt knowledge and then procuring horses, right?
Yep. So I have always had horses. So I guess I would say that I was a horsewoman first. And a lot of my work was, well, I did not do this. Obviously, I started my career as a garden designer and an herbalist. And so, I'm really comfortable outside. Being in nature is second nature to me. Being out there with the horses is as well. So it kind of evolved into this because I went I went with a friend to a retreat years ago, and I thought that I was going along to, be a good friend and support this friend who wanted to do this retreat with horses. And I knew nothing about Gestalt. I knew nothing about it. I thought that I was just going out west to ride horses, and that sounded great to me. That's what I was going to do. And when I got to this retreat, which was a Gestalt retreat, it blew my mind. It changed everything for me, everything that I thought I knew about horses. It, gosh, had me take a really good look at who I was as a horsewoman and how I had learned things. I think I'd always taken a really natural approach to my horses. I rode them, but I didn't compete. I had more of, they were more a part of my family, I suppose. I guess pet, but really part of my family, like my dogs were, and approached them that way. But what I saw them do, what I saw them do as gestaltists through an equine gestalt experience blew my mind and changed everything. And made me laugh, made me cry, broke my heart, but like all the things, right? And it was lovely. A few years later, I'd always thought about, gosh, it allowed me to take a deep dive into maybe offering this, having this be something that I could offer. But first, I really needed to become connected with it. And there were a few things that were really important to me. And one of them was that it always, the horses were always shown for who they were. They were always highlighted as their unique talents and gifts to us, right? They are the stars of the show here. And they are not a tool, and they are not, I don't use them, that this is consensual. And the moment that they decided that they were not interested, we didn't do it.
That is exactly what the fear-free movement is too. And if you're going to bond with an animal, then you absolutely need to have their consent as a partnership versus making them do something. And it made me think about individual personalities of horses, because I don't know a lot of horses. I know a few horses. I had a friend who had a horse who actually seemed to have a really good sense of humor. He was hilarious. And he was gentle, and he would like play this game where he would hide behind a tree, like his head, but you could still see his body. It was so funny. And then he would peek out, and then he would, run around. And he was also a very calm horse to be around. And he was good with other horses who maybe weren't so calm. He could sort of calm them as well, in his presence. And it makes me think, about these horses and their individual personalities and what they might be like as individuals. And do you match that particular horse with a client because they've matched, or is it more sort of an organic matching?
That's a great question. It has like a two-part answer. So I'll start with saying, yes, horses all have their unique personalities, and slowing down to get to know them and to see them for that is a really beautiful experience. Each one of them are very, very unique. And now I know them so well that I can see when they're like not having something or when they're really excited about something. One of the things is that when someone comes here, let me even back up and tell you that in my I'll call it like get to know you, like really deepened my relationship with my horses. I took 2 years to decide if this was the right avenue for me, like if this all made sense to me. And so I took this time to be with my horses and learn from them. And when I did that, I could, these, oh gosh, personalities really started coming up. In addition to that, when I became a gestaltist, when I started seeing clients, people would come here and I may have a specific horse picked out for them to work with, and another one would step up right away and claim that person as their client. And I'll tell you why in a second, but that is very interesting to me because some of the horses that are here, I have two that are like, I guess, smaller, maybe more approachable. So if I know somebody that is coming, has never been around a horse or might be a little timid, I'm going to put them with a horse that size-wise isn't intimidating to them because I have some really big horses here. It turns out that the big horses are the
Mhm.
big horses are more tender and sweet and they're like, oh, they're more, I have one that's kind of a bull in a china shop. He just, he really tiptoes around like a little mouse or tries to, but he's a big horse. And so someone who is willing to see him for that and understand that and be in his presence and trust it. Trust that he's not going to hurt you. He's not going to step on you. He's he may even take a few steps back to give somebody their space, knowing and understanding that they might be a little timid. But now I have horses that show up, and this is really fascinating. And again, how you get to know your horses. I have horses that will show up to show me that this person is going through a specific situation. For instance, I have one horse who, even if I have a horse picked out already, if she senses that a client is coming to me because they're experiencing deep grief, she will step forward every time and push him out of the other horses out of the way to meet this client and work the session with the client. She's adamant about it. And when I started noticing every time that whatever client showed up was actually experiencing grief and my horse showed up, now I know that that's her specialty. That's what she connects with. That's her mission.
And maybe even this client was not aware that they were
Oh, God.
harboring this deep grief at this point, right?
They typically are not. Most people come to me thinking, having their mindset in this is what's troubling me, and it really that's your brain telling you that, and really it's completely different. And my horse, I just want to say, this is a big component to this. The horse is actually a the coach. They co-facilitate these sessions with me, and they partner with me on this. And the horses are at full liberty. They're not haltered. There's no ropes. They're not handled. They step up and do this work.
Do you think, Kelly, that this is be an emotionally draining experience for the horse, or are they able to ground themselves again afterwards? They don't carry that. They don't carry my trauma with them, right? They're not holding on to that.
That's a great question. No. As I said in the beginning, horses regulate their nervous systems all day long. they're a prey animal. They're regulating their nervous system. And so you will see a horse, they do something called leeching, and it looks very much like yawning, like that horse is yawning.
Yeah.
And that is them releasing that energy. That's their regulation for themselves. And then you'll see them, I watch them do it out in the field.
Mhm.
You'll see them interact with other horses and do that next to each other. They'll sometimes do that after a big session or during a session with a client, they'll do that. And then after every client, after every session, I do something for my horses to ensure that they're able to have a big release themselves. And that might be opening the gates and going for a big gallop. And they do. They'll run around the pasture, they'll do a big loop. Sometimes they'll get down and they'll roll. Rolling is also a way for a horse to release that energy and shake it off. And then they're right back to being a horse again. It's fascinating.
That's amazing. I wish I possessed that. And when you say this yawning, it makes me think like, when you get upset and people go, take a deep breath. And of course, at first you're like, ugh. But taking a deep breath, but getting a full lung capacity of air and releasing it is relaxing. It does let things go.
Absolutely. We do a lot of breath work and a lot of meditation with the horses to try to help people get into that space, have a touchstone that they can connect with throughout their life, throughout their day-to-day, making it their practice, really. It's about connecting to your breath and getting present. That is the thing that gets us present. And so the other part of this, and I think it's a huge component to the work with the horses, is that horses are pure energy. They're made up entirely of energy. And what my mentor found, I studied with Melissa Pierce out in Colorado, and she is a psychotherapist who, through her work, I guess it was like in the early 80s, through her work with clients, started noticing how horses were responding just outside the door while she was seeing clients in her home office. And then started correlating the fact that horses were regulating her clients through their chakras. And what that means is that in a session, my horses will align the chakra points of their body, which are the energy points of their body, with my clients' chakras. So there's a lot of work going on right now with trauma. And just, for the record, I'd like to say that trauma is defined as an adverse experience. And every single person in the world has experienced trauma and adverse experience, but in different intensities. Your trauma might not be my trauma, but we all hold on to that in our body. And how we are able to, even from an epigenetic standpoint, like generational trauma, how it's passed down to us. The work in this field is huge right now. And what they're saying is that trauma is held in the chakra points of our body. And so my horse, who responds to energy, will align itself, its chakra points, to my client's chakra points to show me where they're trapped in their body. That's really fascinating.
How do they show you?
They literally align their body, the chakra points in their body. So I'll give you an easy one. I have a client that comes to me and for whatever, maybe she can't tell somebody in her life something that she needs to say. So her throat chakra is blocked. And she doesn't know this, but my horse will align itself so that its throat lines up. It'll stand next to my client and line up its throat with hers. My people who people who come to me in deep grief, their heart just hurts, their heart aches. And my horse will press its heart right into your heart. It'll
What?
put its chest
I
right
know.
into
I
your
know. It's such a gift. It's
Oh,
such a gift to the human race. We do not deserve it.
no.
It's such a gift.
And again, this is it. It's slowing down in observation of what's possible. And when you see it happening, there's no mistaking it. It's mind blowing. There's no mistaking it. You know, sometimes I'll have my clients closing their eyes because I want them to feel into their body to get a really good sense of what that's like as my horse works around them, so that they don't get caught up in their own head about what's the horse doing. Oh, the horse went over there, he moved away, maybe he doesn't like me, maybe I'm doing something wrong, right? It's not about that. It's about slowing down to be grounded in your body, to feel into your body so that you can access these blockages, right? Wherever your emotions or your pain is held in your body, and allow my horse to free that up. It's really beautiful. It's really something.
It really is. And it makes me wonder, why do horses care about us? Why do they care about how we feel?
I wish I knew that. I mean, I feel like they all want to be at peace, right? I mean,
Right.
isn't that what we all want?
We all want that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so maybe it is that if we're in their bubble, they're trying to help us regulate. I don't know. It's one of the most spiritual things I've ever witnessed in my life. It just,
I have a friend who has two horses and two mini horses. And I laugh because the difference between the two, or the bigger horses and the mini horses, is so different. The larger horses will come right over to me. They'll put their head over the fence. They'll put their head on my shoulder, which is coincidentally where I have shoulder pain. But also,
uh,
yeah. And then they'll nibble and I'll scratch them. And we just have this connection. And the mini horses are like, they just want to run around and party.
well, there is a lot to that. You know, they can point out pain in the body,
Right.
right? They often do. I have another horse that, gosh, she would, if I put her in the front pasture, all she does is scream at people going by all day long, whinnying and running to them. And I found out that oftentimes the energy for people who are in pain is quite intense, like who are in, even physical pain. And can, she was reading them. She
Mhm.
was taking a read. That's what I call it,
Yeah.
is when it's almost like a body scan.
Mhm.
And they'll do that too. The first time that you meet them, when you go into the paddock, I usually have someone stand, close their eyes. I put them through a meditation to align them with their chakras. And my horse will come over and take a read on them, meaning that he'll move his nose across their body from head to toe. Sometimes he already has it. He's like, yep, got this one. I know exactly what I'm doing. I don't always know, right? So mine is coactive questioning. I'm putting someone into an, I'm giving someone an opportunity to have an experience. And based on what my horse does, it leads me to ask appropriate questions to my client to help move them through the experience and clear that unfinished business or trauma or whatever is holding them back in life out. And it is always, always held in the chakra points of their body.
I learned that you have a horse that is just solid, right? Like super grounded. And you were taken aback when she actually bit one of your clients in the shoulder. And as a physical therapist, he was sharing this and how uncanny it was and what that led to ultimately. We were just talking about physical things. And I was just blown away by him sharing the story. Would you like to share, or is that off limits?
It's not off limits. There's a million of them.
Oh,
It happens often. I think he was sharing one. It happens often. That person had a physical, well, not even, they had a diagnosis, something that was undiagnosed, and they many other aspects in their life were starting to unravel. And it was because they were not paying attention to a nagging pain in their body. And oftentimes our trauma, and again, this is being studied now, that trauma held in the body can lead to so many different diseases, other ailments. There's a laundry list of things. And this girl was not paying attention to herself, not taking care of herself, not following signs, and not my horse. It was at
Oh,
it was not my horse. It was at a learning. It was at a teaching. He bit her arm, and she went to the doctor, and she had cancer on that side of
Wow.
her body. Yeah. Yeah. So things like that happen. I can't speak to that directly, but I can tell you that they do point out different things. And what else can I tell? Oh, they pantomime. My horses have pantomimed sessions with clients. And what that means is something that's happening, the emotion around it is so strong, but the client can't see it. Their whole body, they're having a full body experience around something, but their brain is protecting them and won't allow them to see that. And they have to see that to get past it, to move the energy, to move through it and be done with it. And so if they are blocked, there are instances where I have one horse who's actually amazing at this. He will start to pantomime or act out that person's trauma. And it is fascinating. I'm going to have a hard time describing it because it happens in the moment. They might lay down, they might roll, they might push that person around the ring with their nose or act out in some way so that it can clear up or clarify what that person couldn't express. And they see it. It's about the horse's message to the client so that the client is able to recognize, see it. If I see a horse doing something, I'll ask the client, does that have meaning to you? And it always does. They'll start telling me the story of what that horse is doing. And it's this breaking free and opening up. It's like, oh, I haven't ever told anybody that. Gosh, I didn't even know that was there. But they're able to recount stories, maybe from their childhood, or maybe I've even had clients recount stories from the womb. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I know that was in there. These are things that allow me to believe that these horses are pretty magical beings. And if we slow down and give them the opportunity to heal with us or help us, the possibilities are endless. There are a lot of modalities out there that interact with horses. And it's my belief that the freer the horse can be in the process, that the therapy or the coaching, the session is deeper, richer, because it takes place with two consensual beings. And the moment that we halter or put a rope on a horse, imagine, if you will, if that horse's energy and we're energy, and I put my hands on a rope that's tied to a horse, that's tied to a halter, that's tied, put around a horse's face and latched that, and it takes away from something. It changes the dynamic of the session because now we're determining, we have more of a say so. It's not, yeah.
yeah, we're influencing
We're
whether intentionally or
Yeah.
not. It's changing the entire.
Changes everything. The healing capacity of horses is something that is so beautiful. And yeah, the more people that know about that, there more opportunity for people to truly heal. I mean, things that they experience in with the horses, once they move through it, they never revisit that. And that is fascinating to me. So while talk therapy is important and has its place and has helped so many people, this is another layer. This is another level, because when you come and tell my horse your story, the opportunity for that horse to help you move that energy, whatever is holding you back, move that out and away from you, that's a truly healing experience. It's a somatic experience that moves that energy, takes that right out of your body, helps you move through that experience. And I think, some people would say, oh my gosh, that's a lot of woo, or, really, that's really,
Yeah.
you have to experience. Yes, because really, 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 I think horses, in some way, I think they saved my life.
I was just gonna say it's interesting because, I think that we as a society are moving more. I've seen it in veterinary medicine, like toward holistic therapies and things like that. And, as a physical therapist, and I'm sure your husband can speak to this, everything is evidence-based and grounded in research and so on and so forth. And since I've shifted from working with people to animals, I've really embraced, these other attributes that I think are often negated. But when you look at other cultures, they're very alive and present. We had a whole show on like Eastern medicine
Yeah.
versus Western medicine, and, how that's even defined. And, so for my own pets, I'm embracing this. This is kind of a digression. I want to make it clear for our listeners, and I think that it has been clear, but just really put it out there. This type of work
Yeah.
does not require any riding or horse experience on the part of the human participant.
That's correct. It is a non-riding session. Absolutely. Yep. And you do not have to have any experience with horses. And often the people who do have experience with horses have a complete mind shift once they get here. Once they witness, it's remarkable. They've not experienced anything like that before.
I know before we actually got on the show, we were talking about the use of the word therapy and that you're a coach. And then we talked about that therapy associated with horses is often, and I was familiar with it, what is called hippotherapy. This is clearly different than that. So hippotherapy, as I understand it, is allowing horses to provide physical therapy to individuals that may have physical or sensory impairments, can help with balance, stability, core strength, that sort of thing. And so hippotherapy and this type of equine assisted gestalt therapy is different.
So all of those have their place. Where Gestalt therapy is different, or, as you said, I'm a coach. So there's no degree for Gestalt. And unless you went to school to become a therapist, a psychotherapist, that's the only way you would obtain a degree in the field. And they don't typically teach the humanistic therapy of Gestalt. So to clarify, I have a certification for coaching that is a 4-year degree. And within that program, part of the requirement is that for the entire duration of that schooling, you are doing your own personal work. So I could not do what I do if I had not fished out all the things in my life that could be holding me back from being the best version of me. There's a lot of human experiences. We said that the majority of our society suffers from anxiety. How do they come to have anxiety? And most of the time, many of us could be really confluent with that. And I have done my personal work around. I had to make sure that I went through it and
Went
experienced
all the way through.
all the way through it. And it's really interesting because you're like, no way, I'm fine. I don't have any stuff. Really? What could
There's
be?
always stuff. There's always
Everybody's
stuff.
got stuff. Everyone's got stuff, and you got to fish it out. And when I did, I was like, woo, I felt
Okay.
lighter.
That was a
I
lot.
felt
That was
good.
heavy.
Yeah. As a gestaltist, it's really about being gestalt, living in the present moment, adopting that as my practice. That's who I am. And when things come up, I have an avenue, I have an opportunity to work through them. And my horses are a big component to that. But not everybody has that. And so for me, I thought, how could I do two things? How could I give back to a community of people that are in desperate need of this therapy modality, and at the same time shed a light on the healing capacity of horses, the magic of horses, not just that they're beautiful to look at, not just that, oh, like the dream of being around a horse or being on a horse, or it was about standing side by side with them and moving through some of the most difficult and beautiful parts of life. Usually I work with a herd of horses, and I'll have these people go in and walk through a herd of 60 horses and watch how those horses respond to them. And believe it or not, nobody's afraid. It's fascinating just how calm and slower they move, or how their willingness to stand still when 50 horses are walking towards you. And you find this place in your body where you're like, oh, I'm just going to stand right here. These are really big experiences for people. And when other people bear witness in a group setting or in a retreat setting to the work that someone is doing with one of the horses, like they're having a session in front of everybody or moving through an experience, man, there's not a dry eye in the place. And often it is because while they can understand what the human is going through, because 9 times out of 10, we've all gone through something similar in our life, what is jaw-dropping is to watch that horse in action with that client. And there's usually not a dry eye in the place. It's really fascinating.
Kelly, you said like, herd of 50, 60 horses and, and standing your ground and being surrounded and so forth. Then why, if horses are really intuitive, and if I'm in a stall with a horse and people say, oh, don't stand behind the horse, they might kick you. Where does that come from?
Well, there are safety precautions, right? And so we do some of that stuff, but it's where we hold our energy in our body. So when you approach someone, where do you hold your energy? You hold your energy typically in your solar plexus, which is across your belly.
Mm-hmm.
So when I go to catch, this is an example, when I go to catch a horse in a field, I know I'm not going to walk straight towards him. You're walking straight towards him with the intention of catching him in the field, and maybe the mood that you're in or the day that you've had or whatever is rested in your solar plexus in your belly. Well, all that energy is coming at my horse. And what's he going to do? He's going to go the other way. He doesn't want me coming at him. Oftentimes I'll approach him kind of like from the side, or like I'm walking out to the paddock, but I'm not even looking at him. And then I'll stop, I'll turn to him. With my horses, I'll bend slightly, almost like a bow, and they walk right over to me every time. So it's how you're approaching them.
Kelly, my final question is, can you just briefly describe, like, logistically, operationally, what a typical session looks like? So we schedule this, it's a one-on-one, we drive to your farm, and then what happens?
They are all uniquely different.
I knew you were going to say that.
They just are. So a one-on-one session is an hour and 45 minutes. I'd plan on like a 2-hour time frame to be here with me.
Wow.
We do a lot of different things within that time. I don't know how that session will look because again, it happens in the moment and with what you bring me, what's coming up for you in that day, that moment. And we'll meet here. I have like a studio that we meet in, and it has views of the horses. The horses are all around us, but they're outside. They usually come over right away and they're tuned in and listening, really kind of feeling through our conversation. There might be we do a little talking there to kind of get acquainted, I guess. And then we move right into an experience. We'll go outside and start working with the horses. My clients who have seen me for several years, they come to me in between maybe therapy sessions, or, they'll come to me, oh gosh, once a month or something like that. And it's to keep them in their practice of Gestalt, to keep them in the practice of being present, to being in tune to their body. But really, it's that keeping you in the practice of tuning into yourself. We will put ourselves last every time. So yeah, it's that practice of staying in tune with ourselves.
So Kelly, as we're wrapping up, can you let our audience know where can they find you?
My practice is in West Newbury, Massachusetts. And if you're interested in equine gestalt, you could go to my website, which is wildomen.com. You could register for a discovery call, which is free. That's kind of getting to know a little bit more about the work that I'm doing here and if it's right for you. Or you could look at Instagram too. There's a lot that I put on a Wild Omen on Instagram. It keeps everybody up to date on everything that's new and happening. There's a ton of information on the horses there. So there's private sessions. There's a whole bunch of different options for people. And again, I run seasonal retreats from June until October, and those are in Wyoming, Montana, and Colorado. And those are women's retreats. They're life-changing events. They're beautiful.
Is there a place that people can also go to find an equine-assisted gestalt coach in their area?
There is. You could go to touchedbyahorse.com, and that's Melissa Pierce's certification program. She has us all listed in there worldwide.
Thank you so much. This
You're
was
welcome.
a fascinating journey that you took us on today. I am in awe of the work that you do, and I am constantly in awe of the horse and its nature. So thank you very much for being here and enlightening us today on Gestalt therapy.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you very, very much. Anytime I have an opportunity to speak about, horses and the healing capacity of horses, I'm there. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed our show.
Follow us on social media at PetAbility Podcast.
And please check out our affiliates and sponsors.
Simply go to the show notes for information and links.
Thank you and tune in next time.